alone in finding out who you really are? Do you feel sad, confused, or lost? Do you feel that you're at the point of no return, feeling that you are different, that feel maybe something is wrong with you, or it's just something that you feel uncomfortable about yourself? Do you feel that no one seems to understand or care about you? Don't forever fret. I'm here today to share with you based on what it reads about my diagnostic story of ADHD. Hi chameleons, welcome back, and welcome back to the new ones of this channel. My name is Aspie Answers. I'm a host, I'm a content creator. I talk about autism, mental health, and a little bit about me with a bit of fun and games and travel. So into any of these, feel free to smash that subscribe button on the bottom of the right hand corner of the screen, as I usually post these once or twice a week, or my items of stability of these topics may change. So you may be questioning right now from the very beginning of the let go of what I was sharing with you, right? Well, as I said, it should be clear and obvious right now based on what I'm sharing with you all. This is all about my story time, about my diagnostic story journey. So it all began basically as of late on the 12th of September 2022, that I had to reassess myself based on my conditions that I have clearly shared with you all based on the very beginning of my journey with autism, ADHD, and the host of mental illness, which I'll link in the icon above me and below me in the description of the very beginning of my journey. So if you're into finding out more about me and also maybe finding out more about what that journey is all about, but this one is just a more continuation of this. This was obviously, as I shared, was recommended by two people, one of which is Nick Stoneman, who is my autistic advocate, who works as a navigator through the South Island Advocacy Trust, which this isn't a government funded trust. They solely rely on community donations as well as some of the community fundraising, especially through his trust. He does some fundraising on his own with his team, be it Saucer Sizzles, and his team obviously relies on this to continue on the continuation of support for people like me on the autism spectrum, as well as maybe people just in general that are different, that need voices to be heard. This trust of the Disability Advisory Trust that he works for was formed or was given birth in the year of 2019, as it was clear that it was an alternative service for those that was in need of terms of effective advocacy or advocates for those living on a mainstream benefit that is issued by the Ministry of the Social Development, that is known as working income. It was then soon became clear that supported advocacy was needed in several areas, obviously, and they now support and advocate for those with mental health and neurological developmental disorders and those who need their voices to be heard in the wider community. Their commitment is that they're committed in helping the community, that they've dedicated some teams in Christchurch of New Zealand and on the west coast, and it's slowly growing more for more navigators up north now. I found out through Nick himself, which is in Wellington and Kapiti, especially from memory. I don't know, but I'll link all the description on where to contact him for more information if you need to. So in saying this, for their team, basically what they can do to work with you, they will assist you anywhere, maybe in the South Island, while they're in the West Coast. Team is ready to assist us anywhere on the West Coast or the South Island, or as he mentioned to me, there are now some starting to pop up around the North Island, especially Kapiti and Wellington region. The services they provide, but is not necessarily limited to them, it will include your housing, the working income appointments, speaking out for you on your behalf, government appointed roles, ACC work, Ministry of Education work, and access matters. The key offerings for this is they will assist you in moving through the bureaucratic processes where you may feel uncomfortable or threatened by the process. Now, the second person who recommended me to get reassessed was Helen Karkas, who is my connector through Mana Whaikaha. And obviously you may be wondering who or what is Mana Whaikaha. Mana Whaikaha is a disability support system that is run through the National Ministry of Health, and obviously this is offering disabled people, tangata Waikaha Māori families, whānau and aiga, more choices and control over these supports to best tailor and suit for their accommodation needs. What they can offer to you is your kaituhono or connectors, disability funding, and also the capability building funding. The support services they provide is disability support services, equipment, rental and accommodation, modifications, I should say, and advocacy support. So obviously, again, the contacts will be obviously also in the description below you. So the main aim and goal for me when I went to SPELD ADD, which is located in Palmerston North. Again, all their contact details will be listed below. That was to see if there was any changes based during or after this reassessment. At the time, obviously, as I shared earlier briefly, that I was accessed earlier on their piece when I was 13, and then again when I was 16, when I was studying at UCO by the name of David Drewbridge from SPELD Assessment. The name of this assessment that they did for me was a specific learning disorder assessment, which is obviously known for a specialised assessment or test to young children of any age, especially the young ones, like maybe say rough estimate, if you've got a kid that is going through the transitional stage from your kindergarten stage to primary school age, is best fitted for this until maybe say in your early teens to get this assessment sorted out. That will help with any learning disorders such as dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum and the like. The duration of this assessment they recommend should take roughly between 2 to 3 hours maximum. The services they provide are some tutors, programs and tools that are specifically designed for parents and children to help with their accommodation needs. Obviously, the location where you can find them is in the Grand Building opposite All Saints Church Street, Palmerston North, where I hopefully will have a map to show that location for you. Who are they? Obviously, you may be wondering. They're a non-profit, not-for-profit organisation and are a registered charity established in the year of 1999 that provides support and services for people with learning difficulties or differences such as dyslexia and other specific learning difficulties, as well as attention hyperactive disorder of ADHD. They also provide help for parents and families, educators, employers and the wider community for people with specific learning disorders. Their aims are basically to enable those with specific learning disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder to reach their full potential in their life. They operate in the lower central North Island from their base of Palmerston North, where I'm from. Their vision that every individual with specific learning disorder or ADHD has their learning needs recognised and met, and for the educators and other agencies around them that works around them to share knowledge in a collaborative way for the good of all. Their mission is to enable and facilitate the recognition, remediation and referral of those who learn differently, to encourage their success and enjoyment of lifelong learning. To achieve this through them is in-depth assessment of needs and strengths by specifically trained assessors, targeted programs of tutoring for students who need the individual help, in-depth training for tutors and other educators alike, access to information via their seminars, website, New Zealand Library. The assessments that they do, they use a variety of assessment tools. Areas of strengths and weaknesses will be identified and form a basis of a detailed, personalised recommendation. An assessment takes up to 3 hours, as I said earlier, and is in the form of an interview and series of tests. Parents are welcome to attend with their children, regardless of their age maybe. A full report will be written by their assessor and then it is emailed out to you to let you know what's the next steps. To determine a follow-up discussion of the result will, however, is highly recommended. So let's quickly, hopefully if I've got time to do this, is talk a bit briefly about what happened during my assessment period so that you get a full idea and just of how it works for me. This season I was talking briefly about my past diagnosis of who diagnosed me, the year and what have you, and I told her specifically David Drewbridge obviously was the one at the time, I think in the year of 2012, and then I was then reassessed but during the time of my study at UCO Palmerston North. We shared briefly based on my understanding her and understanding about autism, of what it is as well, or more specifically during that time of my diagnosis, Asperger's syndrome at the time, and how we agreed that this term is almost non-existent now in the DSM-5 because they're trying to remove it. So therefore of this diagnosis will depend on how they wish to be diagnosed. If they still wish to be diagnosed as Asperger's syndrome or Asperger's, or just a person with Asperger's syndrome. I have clearly mentioned basically the non-existent diagnosis of why it is in one of my videos, which I'll link in the icon above me and in the description box below me, as well as in saying this also basically the term and definition of Asperger's syndrome and so on and so forth, which again all this will be listed below you to get a better understanding. So feel free to click above me right now or wait till this video ends. We then discussed during the time while I was there, because obviously during that time while it was wet and raining that I was a bit stressed, I was huffing and puffing obviously obviously a bit nervous, but then again, I shouldn't have been nervous because I felt in my well-being at the time that it shouldn't have changed of the actual diagnosis that was given to me. How about, obviously, the next step was talking about my past, how I felt about the diagnosis, and also in the present after being given to it, how I cope with it on a daily and deal with it on a daily. Any, like, relationships, if I've got any, if so, how it's going, how I feel and what have you, and so on and so forth, just to get a brief understanding, the gist of how I work as a person, despite that label mentality that they gave to me at that point of time. And saying that, we then moved on to see what will help me with my diagnosis of managing it and treating it, and all I shared with her during that time of the diagnosis or just before the actual assessment was that still to this day I still do the same things, which is blogging, vlogging, journaling, counselling sometimes if I need it, even though at the moment, as I shared with her, the counsellor I was recommended to go through was at the time busy with other clients with autism and just clients in general. To calm down my anxiety and other mental illness, I do some grounding techniques, breathing techniques, meditation, be it reading the scriptures or just, grounding techniques especially, as well as listening to music, and I dance it out, so on and so forth. She then asked me if I believe in taking any medication such as the ones that most assessors or specialists will recommend you to do, be it your Ritalin, your antidepressants, and I told her how I felt about it. I am not going to dismiss anyone that do believe that they should take Ritalin, antidepressants. That's for you guys. I'm just sharing this based on my experience before I could continue any further to cause any triggers to you guys that are actually taking. This is not my goal here. I'm just trying to share out what was shared based on my opinion, viewpoint, as well as her viewpoint of it all. Because as I believe, based on my understanding, that antidepressants, especially for those that are going through certain mental illnesses, should be a last resort to actually use, because there are methods and techniques that should hopefully work for many people like me or you that goes through on the daily struggles of our mental illnesses. But then again, what works for me may not work for you, and vice versa, what works for you may not work for me. So therefore we just need to create an even balance and understanding for each other here while I'm discussing this to you. As I said to her also, I told her my viewpoint about Ritalin, which she mentioned about Ritalin as a recommendation for me to take as a, precaution for my symptoms that I gave her, because obviously she asked me about my symptoms, because obviously to rule out any other maybe hidden conditions, but as we know, autism, ADHD as comorbidity, they overlap in the same retrospect of signs and symptoms, even though, as I shared earlier, that sometimes for females especially, it can be hard to get diagnosed properly with autism, ADHD and all the like, because obviously, especially with autism, I found out that many years ago, it was well known that it was only supposedly 50% chance that males will be the ones that will be diagnosed than the females, because obviously for the females they're really good at masking, which I shared briefly about masking, which I'll link above me and in the description box below me. So as I said before, that I don't take any medications that she has fully recommended. So I feel like I said is the last resort to be given. They need, told her my viewpoint, and she actually understood me well and clear and respected my viewpoint at this point. I just told her the alternative to Ritalin and antidepressants of a form of medication, if you will, but they're not listed as medications. As I told her, I take my usual everyday supplements and my multivitamins and mineral supplements versus my fish oil supplements, as well as evening oil, primrose supplements, and any other supplements that will help maintain and keep to my dietary needs, and so on and so forth, as well as such as, some other supplements for my hair, nails, my brain clarity, and what have you, along with just the normal everyday basics of looking after my physical health and appearance based on showering, making sure clean, not smelly, and what have you. She then suggests to me during this time, with the help of assistants of Wizards registered with them, that I could possibly go to a naturopath or herbalist based on she believed if I'm missing any nutrients that are not being taken care of by basically one of the naturopaths would take a hair sample out of my hair, obviously, along with doing also a hearing test that was recommended, because obviously during the time when we did this assessment with the auditory she believed that there was a bit of weakness there based on my age level, on my, comprehension and understanding. And then she asked me during the time when she recommended the hearing test, when was the last time I actually had my hearing test done, and I just told her basically I couldn't remember the actual date and all. So after all these questions and investigating more so to what was shared with her, we then moved on to the actual specific learning disability assessment with a series of questions, as well as not just series of questions as such. What it covers is like your auditory, your comprehension, your reading level, your actual total recall of your memory recall based on that, your balance, your movement, it's a whole bunch of set kind of methods that they've got there that will test you based on your age and level of your everyday specific learning disability. Like, I knew straight off the bat some of the stuff would be, again, as I said earlier, will be the same kind of jurisdiction of the assessment in itself, that I'll be based on that age group and the specific disabilities there that she listed after the assessment, based on obviously my comprehension and my understanding versus my actual, especially the balance part that really got me a bit nervous, because obviously at the time, as I said, I was tired, stressed and everything else. I probably could have passed that part of the assessment, but then again, like, after that was finished, she strongly believed it's still to this day the label diagnosis of autism / ADHD, but more now she feels strongly it's swaying towards ADHD more than actual autism or Asperger's syndrome, sadly. But I still believe in my own being, for the first diagnosis, when I first got diagnosed, it is actually Asperger's syndrome, which, again, I'll link the diagnosis story more about it and how you can get the steps into how you can get the diagnosis done. So the next bit is how I felt about the diagnosis, with a bit of a relief and weight off my shoulders, obviously, because as I said before, I may have my everyday struggles like everybody else that I face every day as an autistic and person with ADHD, along with a host of mental illnesses. But at the moment, at this current time, during my struggles, I am currently seeking out some support team, be it a support person to help me, assist in my everyday needs, regardless what it is. If I'm seeking out work, trying to balance out with my aims and goals right now to actually really push forward, to actually get my book work done, as well as getting myself behind the wheel to gain the confidence again for driving, especially because obviously that's my next step, especially if I do really want to seek out, employment and actually continue on, as I said before, my advocacy training and work for you guys. At this point, I want to try and live as independently as possible, and obviously many people see me as a strong-willed young woman and goal-focused young woman that is living independently regardless. After all, I am still human. I'm not perfect after all as well. In saying this, I do my utter best to strive for not just perfection as such, but to accomplish or achieve whatever I have set myself to do, and do it with the right help and support of people around me, with the right frame of mind, and actually, not have any negative Nancy's. I have to this day decided, even though many people may find this really sad, to cut ties with certain people that has dragged me down, which can be a lonely process, but that's the way life is. We choose to, cling on to people that we thought were friends or what have you, and that's insane that many people may think that, that's not on, but that was my own personal choice, to be frank. My journey is still a journey of self-discovery, self-exploring who I am and what I am. Underneath these diagnoses, that's my main next goal step to actually do, to self-explore about myself, learn more about me and what have you. Just as anyone else would want to do, probably in their everyday life, to get to know them as a better person and what have you. To find out more about me, I shall hopefully post a video about me right now, so be sure to click the screen above me. And the next video or blog post should be the steps here in New Zealand on how you can actually take for the diagnosis of ADHD.